evening, you're watching India First. Turkey's President Erdogan has cancelled his proposed visit to Israel. Turkey refuses to call Hamas terrorists but considers them mujahideen or holy warriors fighting for their land and freedom. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has also stirred a hornet's nest by talking of 56 years of suffocating occupation and suffering of Palestinian people, claiming Hamas terror attack was not in a vacuum. Israel is up in arms. Elion Levy, spokesperson in Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office, joins me on this special broadcast. I'm Gaurav Sawant. As always, let's get started with the headlines at 10. Hamas, Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad chiefs huddle in Lebanon's capital Beirut. Iran's supreme leader warns Israeli forces incapable of confronting Muslim fighters. It's official. The Maryada Purushottam Sri Ram temple at Ayodhya will be inaugurated on the 22nd of January 2024. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will attend the installation of Maryada Purushottam Sri Ram's statue idol at the temple. Amidst this massive diplomatic row with Canada, India resumes selective visa services after a month of suspending them. Visas will only be issued for entry, business and medical purposes. NCERT recommends changing India to Bharat in school textbooks. India allies Congress and Aam Aadmi Party hit out, claim the BJP is distorting history for political gains. The National Capital Region is covered in smog once again. Pollution levels continue to deteriorate. Stubble burning cases surge in Punjab. BJP blames the Aam Aadmi Party government in Punjab for the spike in pollution. Our top story on this special broadcast is the terror conclave in Beirut, where leaders of Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad met the Hezbollah Secretary General and Lebanese cleric Hassan Nasrallah. The aim of this terror conclave was to synchronize actions of what is known as the axis of resistance, Hamas, Hezbollah and the Islamic Jihad, to take on Israel. After 1,400 people were massacred in Israel on the 7th of October, the country is now fighting a war on multiple fronts, on ground and even in mind space. We get you more in this report.
Israel's war on terror is getting bigger. With Hezbollah on one side and Hamas and Islamic Jihad on the other, Tel Aviv is fighting a multi-front war. And the terror groups seem to be working in tandem. The head of Lebanon's terrorist organization Hezbollah met with top leaders of the Palestinian terror groups Hamas and Islamic Jihad on Wednesday. The meeting between Hezbollah's chief Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, Hamas deputy chief Saleh al-Aruri and Islamic Jihad chief Ziad al-Nakhala took place in Lebanon. In a statement, Hezbollah said that the meeting was to assert their international position and to discuss what needs to be done to defeat Israel in the ongoing war. Hezbollah also added that every fighter who died in the war with Israel should be treated as a martyr. Hamas and Hezbollah share some common ideological goals and are supported by Iran.
This conclave of the Hezbollah, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad takes on huge significance because apart from their identity of being Iranian proxies, 19 days into this conflict, it could mean a more coordinated level of attacks to surround Israel.
If Hezbollah, which possesses significant military capabilities, joins forces with Hamas, it could create a more potent and coordinated front against Israel.
As a government, like I said, we are concerned, of course. But then again, Hezbollah knows that war is not a cakewalk for all parties. I mean, even for Israel also. The devastating repercussions of war are, I mean, no one wants to go into this scenario. And let's hope that it will not happen.
At the back of this meeting of his proxies, Iran's supreme leader warned that Israeli forces are incapable of confronting the Muslim fighters. Meanwhile, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has defended the Hamas, saying that Hamas is not a terror group, but a patriotic organization.
Şimdi buradan İsrail'e
Israel is acting like a terrorist organization and not a state. This will never be appreciated by us. Israel is not defending itself, but committing crimes against humanity. Whole world must act to stop these barbaric acts.
Şimdi buradan sesleniyorum.
Such an alliance could launch coordinated attacks, engage in guerrilla warfare, and escalate the conflict exponentially. Bureau Report, India Today.
Israeli forces have targeted Syrian airports both at Aleppo and in Damascus. Israel believes Iran is sending weapons and supplies for the Hezbollah and for Hamas through Syria. Israeli artillery has also targeted multiple Hezbollah strongholds in Lebanon, amidst reports that at least 40 Hezbollah fighters have been killed in Israel's actions. Israel has called Iran the fountainhead of terror, funding, arming and launching not just the Hezbollah terrorists but also Hamas and Islamic Jihad, along with giving longer range missiles to Houthi rebels in Yemen.
The Israel-Hamas war theatre is rapidly widening, turning into a multi-front war for Israel. Fighting Hamas in Gaza and West Bank, clashes with Lebanon's Hezbollah, and in fresh escalation, artillery fire exchange with Syria. After Israel accused Iran to trying to deploy weapons in Syria to open a northern front, Israeli military said a number of shells were launched from Syrian territory. IDF fighter jets struck military infrastructure and mortar launchers belonging to the Syrian army, killing multiple Syrian military personnel. The US bases in Syria and Iraq have also come under rocket fire from suspected jihadi groups, leading Washington to raise concern. United States have sent F-16 Fighting Falcon aircraft to help protect troops in Middle East.
Well, Jonathan, as you know, recently we've seen rocket and UAV attacks against bases housing our troops in Iraq and Syria. We're concerned about potential escalation. In fact, what we're seeing is the prospect of a significant escalation of attacks on our troops and our people throughout the region. And because of that, we're going to do what's necessary to make sure that our troops are in a good position. They're protected.
Earlier, Israeli jets targeted the international airports in Syrian capital Damascus and the northern city of Aleppo, which led to fatalities on the ground. Syria's Damascus and Aleppo airports are known as transit points for Iranian arms sent to Hezbollah. Hezbollah has launched multiple rocket strikes against northern Israeli posts from Lebanon since the start of the war with Hamas.
At an operational level, Israel is now fighting an expanding three-front battle. The existing front, of course, is in Gaza, against Hamas, but there's also Hamas positions being hit in the West Bank. And then there's the escalating frontage that is opened in southern Lebanon with the Hezbollah. And finally now an escalating activity against the Syrian army. So 3 big fronts, all of them flashing red.
The expanding war runs the risk of plunging the entire West Asia into a full-fledged war. With Shiv Arur in Tel Aviv, Bureau Report, India Today.
India's #1 political reporter.
Defines what seems to be happening, vendetta politics. कोई दूध के से धुला हुआ नहीं है.
Unmatched eye. Unmatched experience.
The world has changed. My black hair has become grey as well.
And with unmatched passion for the story.
Do not monopolize the conversation.
When it's 100% news that matters. It's News Today with Rajdeep Sardesai. Monday to Friday, 9 p.m. Only on India Today TV.
And I quickly now want to cut across to India Today's Shiv Arur, a man on ground in Israel. And Shiv, you've been traveling extensively to the front lines of this conflict. Day 19. Is there any clarity how close is Israel to its ground operations? What's the latest, Shiv?
You know, Gaurav, that absolutely harrowing body cam footage, 44 minutes long. The hall was absolutely silent as me and a few other journalists, got a chance to watch that unedited body cam, mobile cam, CCTV footage of October the 7th. Suffice it to say, and you and I have covered war together, Gaurav. You and I have seen terrible, terrible things in places that we've reported, from Libya to Egypt to elsewhere. I can guarantee you that this was one of the worst things I've ever seen. Pictures of, bullet-riddled bodies of infants, a person being practically beheaded with a spade, on video, women being dragged off into pickup trucks, dismembered bodies, completely charred, bodies of infants. Israel knows very well right now that apart from the military threat and the military challenge, it's fighting an information and a narrative war as well. So whether it is the chilling confessions of Hamas terrorists in captivity or this unedited footage that has come out right now, it knows that the narrative cannot shift from what happened on October the 7th. Now the use of that of all this footage is also alarming, because Israel is aware that such footage goes a long way for the Hamas to claim martyrdom, to claim, that it is able to achieve its capabilities and its aims, that this is no longer, just a small ragtag organization, but one with military capabilities, the ability to bring a formidable power like Israel to use and catch it off guard. All of that has already happened in a big way on social media. In fact, I just want to quickly show you, people like this lady distributing these yellow ribbons. The yellow ribbons have become a symbol of the hostages and this crisis right now. I'm at the kidnapped person's wall here in Tel Aviv, and I can tell you the pressure is building. Big protest is going to happen tomorrow. They want a ceasefire. The families are extremely emotional, so we'll be reporting on that aspect as well. If there's one thing that has complicated everything that Israel perhaps wants to do at this point in time, it's the hostages.
And as this pressure builds, what are Israeli ground forces intending to do? Or will we see more softening of the target from air and artillery before ground forces are committed for deeper raids? I believe there are some shallow raids and special forces operations that are already underway. But what next, Shiv?
Well, things have actually been moving quite dramatically. The fronts that have opened for Israel in 4 different directions are actually expanding visibly day on day. Gaurav, you've been reporting from here. You've seen all of these places. Things have gone to the next level now. There is an active crossfire that's on between Israel and Syria. That's the very latest thing that has happened. But other than that, the crossfire between Israel and the Hezbollah in southern Lebanon has escalated quite dramatically. There is a daily exchange of heavy fire, anti-tank weapons, the use of fighter aircraft as well, that has made this, almost a full-fledged front. As far as the Gaza front is concerned, I was there till late last evening, and even though access is heavily curtailed now, and even filming is not being allowed in the frontline areas, I personally witnessed huge deployments there. The tanks, the weapons, the artillery, they've gone from practice mode into action stations. Now, whether that means an imminent, invasion, a full-scale armored invasion into Gaza remains to be seen. That's not something that, most people who've conjectured so far have got it wrong. But 20 days into this conflict, could things actually be escalating to a level, of the kind of operations we saw in 2009 or 2014? We'll have to wait and see. But Israel at this point in time is fighting in 4 different directions, and the pressure is really, really building on Israel at this point of time, to execute and achieve its oft-professed end game, which is the obliteration of Hamas, because the people in Israel are getting impatient as well.
Shiv, many thanks for joining me. Stay safe, my friend, and keep tracking that story. I will come back to you for more. But what are the wider ramifications of all these developments that are taking place? A terror conclave in Beirut, that's not the only challenge for Israel. Turkey's President Erdogan, he refuses to call Hamas a terrorist organization. He calls them Mujahideen instead. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says Hamas actions were not in a vacuum, but a result of 56 years of suffocating occupation and suffering of Palestinian people. What next for Israel? Elion Levy is the spokesperson in Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office, and he joins me on this special broadcast. Mr. Levy, you heard Turkey's president. He's apparently called off his proposed visit to Israel, accusing Israel of crimes against humanity. He insists Hamas are not terrorists but Mujahideen fighting for their land and for freedom. How does Israel view this statement and these developments, sir?
We utterly deplore any attempt to present Hamas as anything other than terrorists, as anything other than terrorists who are worse than ISIS. I wonder perhaps whether the president has forgotten what Hamas did on the morning of October 7th. It sent death squads into Israeli villages. They shot everyone they saw, civilians. They burned whole families alive in their homes. They beheaded people. They beheaded babies. They raped girls so brutally they broke their bones. They tortured and mutilated parents in front of their children, children in front of their parents. In one house, the first responders saw that the terrorists had gouged a man's eyes out, cut off his wife's breasts, chopped off his son's fingers, and cut off his girl's foot. There is no way to describe the atrocities that Hamas conducted on the morning of October 7th as anything other than a gruesome and barbaric act of savagery and terror. And Israel is building a coalition of international partners that understand that Israel has not only a right but a duty to defend itself against this atrocious terror attack. This
Fair
was
enough.
A crime
As you
against
build this
humanity.
coalition,
It was an
what
act
about
of
the
genocide.
United Nations, Mr. Levy? The United Nations, because it's not just Erdogan. UN Secretary General, he sought a pause in Israel's offensive. Antonio Guterres instead talks of 56 years of suffocating occupation and suffering of Palestinian people. Israel is being asked to pause the bombing.
The UN Secretary General also said there is no excuse and there can be no excuse for the atrocities that Hamas conducted against Israeli civilians on the morning of October 7th. He has been clear on that fact. Now, as for his statement that the massacre did not happen in a vacuum, he is correct. It comes in the context of many years in which Hamas has said that it openly plans to murder all the Jews and destroy the state of Israel. It comes in the context of years in which Hamas has exploited all the humanitarian aid going into the Gaza Strip, all the aid that foreign governments have been giving the people of Gaza in order to build its machine of death against Israel. Just think of all the cement that Israel sent into Gaza to build houses. Hamas used it to build tunnels. All the fuel that Israel sent into the Gaza Strip in order to fuel hospital generators, Hamas is now using to shoot rockets. So the Secretary General is correct. Hamas's massacre did not come in a vacuum. It came in the context of this genocidal terror organization's clear campaign to build a machine of terror and war against Israel in order to perpetrate crimes against humanity, the atrocities that it conducted on the 7th of October, when it murdered 1,400 of our friends and family, injured over 5,000, traumatized tens of thousands, and took 220 of our people hostage into the Gaza Strip, including 30 children, including babies. This was an act of terror, and we expect the whole world to stand by our side as we fight to defeat the terror organization that did this.
Are you disappointed that's not happening, given what the UN Secretary General said, given what Turkey's president has said? And I'm not even talking about what Iran says or what some of the other hostile powers may say. Your effort to have a wider coalition against Hamas is running into a roadblock with people saying, at least pause the bombing, let humanitarian aid reach the Gaza Strip. Even your ally Britain is calling for a pause in bombing. Rishi Sunak has called for a pause for humanitarian aid to reach the Gaza Strip, sir.
Israel is firmly and profoundly disappointed by any nation that is not standing by our side. And as Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said, the UK wants Israel to win. The United States has said Israel will have everything it needs to win. The president of France urged Israel to fight terrorism without mercy. So we know that we have the support of the nations of the free world in this campaign. But let me address that question about a ceasefire, because I know that many of the people who are asking for a ceasefire are asking so out of the best of intentions. Israel will not go back to 6 a.m. on October 7th. We will not go back to a world in which a terrorist organization can invade our homes, behead, burn our families alive. We will not go back to that world. On the 7th of October, Israel was the victim, the Israelis were the victims of an unprovoked act of aggression. We were the victims of crimes against humanity that, by the way, have either killed, abducted, or injured the nationals of over 40 states. So Israel is going after the terrorists who did this. We're making every possible precaution in order to minimize harm to civilians. It's why we're asking them to step out of the way. It's why we're working with international partners so that humanitarian aid can enter the Gaza Strip through Egypt, through the Rafah border crossing. But Israel is not going to let the terrorists who committed the October 7th massacre, who beheaded our people, who burned whole families alive, who raped our little girls. Israel will not allow the terror organization that did that to get away with it. And we know that the free world stands with us and wants us to win this war, because we're fighting not only for our people, we're fighting for the world.
And Mr. Levy, there are reports that Qatar, is indicating that there could be some positive news on hostages. So is Israel willing to let supplies into Gaza Strip in return for either all hostages or at least the civilian hostages?
Humanitarian aid is already entering the Gaza Strip. It's entering through the Rafah border crossing with Egypt. Israel has no objection to that. We want humanitarian aid to reach the civilians in Gaza on condition that it not be taken by Hamas, on condition that Hamas not exploit these humanitarian corridors to smuggle weapons. That is something Israel will not allow. But humanitarian aid is entering the Gaza Strip, and we're very pleased with that.
Okay, but it's required in larger quantities, but in exchange for hostages, is that being worked out for it to go from Israel into the Gaza Strip if all hostages, or at least the civilian hostages, are returned?
Israel is not even going to consider business as usual or trade through its crossings until all 220 of our hostages are home. You know, for many years, Israel provided fuel, it provided water and electricity to the Gaza Strip for free because Hamas didn't pay its electricity bills. And on the morning of October 7th, Hamas fired rockets at the electricity lines, providing electricity to the people of Gaza. It dug up water pipes paid for with international aid in order to send rockets at Israel. It attacked the crossings through which tens of thousands of workers from Gaza went every day into Israel in order to earn their daily bread. So the prospect of Israel opening the borders that Hamas attacked in order to provide humanitarian aid while it holds 220 of our people, including 30 of our children hostage, that is not a viable option. Humanitarian aid is entering. It's entering through Egypt. That's the correct approach, and we hope that that is going to continue, and we hope that the entry of trucks into the Gaza Strip will continue as long as Hamas does not exploit humanitarian aid to arm its own war machine and its machine of terror and death against the civilians of Israel.
The IDF has been quoted saying they're ready for ground operations and they're waiting for the political signal. Is there a delay in giving that political signal? Is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu not sure that the Hamas war-fighting capabilities have been neutralized in these past 19 days and that there could be a major threat to your mechanized forces from anti-tank missiles or IEDs or anti-tank mines when forces go in?
I'm afraid this is the last question I can answer because I have to run to another interview. Israel is going to proceed with the next stage in the operation to dismantle Hamas in response to the October 7th massacre in accordance with our operational needs. Israel isn't acting out of anger or revenge. We have a strategic necessity to destroy the terror organization that committed the October 7th massacre, the worst terror attack in world history after 9/11, and we will use the full might of the IDF, and we will use our force wisely and carefully and judiciously at a time and place of our choosing.
Before I let you go, just answer one question on what is known as the Gaza Metro, the maze of tunnels in Gaza.
I'm afraid we need to wrap up.
After this question,
I'm afraid I have
is
to
the
go to
Gaza
another
Metro
interview.
Israel's Achilles heel, sir?
I'm afraid we have to go to another interview. I'm sorry.
Okay, but does that Gaza Metro or those maze of tunnels, does that remain one of the biggest challenges as far as Israel is concerned? We will put this question to the Israeli Defense Forces and the government in the days and weeks ahead, because perhaps 500 kilometers of that tunnel, 1,300 of them made with concrete or cement, as Mr. Levy said, sent from Israel. It has electricity, it has water supply, it has air conditioning, there are rooms, and perhaps that's the place where many of those 220 hostages have also been kept. But moving on to the other big story, this Israel's war on Hamas terror, it rages for 19 days and counting. Israel is locked in a war of words, even with the United Nations, after Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned losses of life at the Gaza Strip. Israel is now asking for the UN Secretary General to step down.
Israel's war on Hamas has sparked a showdown at the United Nations, where a divided world is sparring over the bombardment of Gaza Strip that has killed and displaced thousands of civilians. The UN Security Council's first discussion on the war was overshadowed by a row triggered by comments made by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres that appeared to rationalize Hamas terror attacks on October 7th.
It is important to also recognize the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. The Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation.
Israel took grave offense to the UN Secretary General's statement, accusing him of tolerating and justifying a terror attack. An angry Israeli Foreign Minister, Eli Cohen, cancelled his meeting with Guterres, and the country demanded the Secretary General's resignation.
When you say those terrible words that these heinous attacks did not happen in a vacuum, you are tolerating terrorism. And by tolerating terrorism, you are justifying terrorism.
Antonio Guterres clarified his remark, saying that grievances of Palestinians do not justify Hamas attack, but added that the Hamas attacks cannot justify killings of Gazans either. The US firmly backed Israel's right to defend itself and called all acts of terrorism unlawful and unjustifiable, whether they are carried out by ISIS, Boko Haram, Lashkar-e-Taiba, or by Hamas.
All acts of terrorism are unlawful and unjustifiable, whether they're carried out by ISIS, by Boko Haram, by Al-Shabaab, by Lashkar-e-Taiba, or by Hamas.
India urged all parties involved in the war to protect civilian lives.
We stood in solidarity with Israel at their moment of crisis when they were facing these terror attacks. Our heartfelt condolences to the families of the victims and prayers for speedy recovery of the injured. Civilian casualties in the ongoing conflict are a matter of serious and continuing concern. All parties must protect civilians, especially women and children.
A representative for Palestine called for an end to the war.
We are here today to stop the killing, to stop the massacres being committed against the Palestinian people. The ongoing massacres being deliberately and systematically and savagely perpetrated by Israel, the occupying power. It is our collective human duty to stop them.
The UN Security Council is deeply divided. While some countries are calling for a ceasefire, Israel has time and again asserted that the war will end only after Hamas is finished. Bureau Report, India Today.
Israel is very clear. It will decimate Hamas as a political entity and as a terrorist organization at the Gaza Strip. Hamas will never rule Gaza Strip, is what Israel claims. Will that actually happen? We'll track that story very closely. But that is all I have for you on India First this evening. Many thanks for watching. Coming up next is Business Today with Sakshi Batra. Stay with us.